In 1912 the Titanic sank and claimed over 1,000 lives. In 2018 Black Ops 4 released a Nazi zombies map taking place on board the Titanic. How many years before we get a 9/11 zombies map? Because subs dedicated to a relatively niche meme that advocates for violence almost inevitably get flooded by unfunny fascist 16-year-olds who begin unironically saying terrible shit and then plastering it onto a JPEG of Lego Yoda. First few Lego Yodas were funny enough, or at least weird enough to be entertaining. Eventually most people moved on, and the sub started to get a lot more nasty, specific, and dog-whistly in its memes. I was in it for a few days near the start, but even after like 4 days seeing memes like waterboard the Arab children in my basement I shall, force them to choke to death while I get off on their screams I will. Gets really old really fast. No, precedent for naming those is presidents. Destroyers and frigate tend to be named after guys who got a Navy Cross or Medal of Honor, such as the USS Michael Murphy, DDG 112. Cruisers are named after battles, such as the USS Chosin. A lot of submarines are named after states, but I'm not a submariner and won't pretend to be familiar with any subhull numbers. So on and so forth. Honestly, if such game ever comes out I feel like they would have a small mission with that part in it. It'd be one of the most American things that could not be passed up. An oppressed minority stepping up to the plate to help his fellow man despite the fact that he was only ever allowed to cook? Followed by most recognition for his actions being posthumous so he never even knew? Apart from the quote single commendation for an unnamed Negro? Yeah, sounds American through and through. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Doris_Miller. On May 27, 1942, Miller was personally recognized by Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet, aboard the aircraft carrier Enterprise in Pearl Harbor. 321, Nimitz presented Miller with the Navy Cross, at the time the third highest Navy award for gallantry during combat, after the Medal of Honor and the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. On August 7, 1942, Congress revised the order of precedence, placing the Navy Cross above the Distinguished Service Medal in precedence. The citation reads as follows. For distinguished devotion to duty, extraordinary courage and disregard for his own personal safety during the attack on the fleet in Pearl Harbor, Territory of Hawaii, by Japanese forces on December 7, 1941. While at the side of his captain on the bridge, Miller, despite enemy strafing and bombing and in the face of a serious fire, assisted in moving his captain, who had been mortally wounded, to a place of greater safety, and later manned and operated a machine gun directed at enemy Japanese attacking aircraft until ordered to leave the bridge. 22. Nimitz said of Miller's commendation, "This marks the first time in this conflict that such high tribute has been made in the Pacific Fleet to a member of his race, and I'm sure that the future will see others similarly honored for brave acts." 321. On November 23, 1942, Miller returned to Pearl Harbor and was ordered on a war bond tour while still attached to Indianapolis. 9. In December 1942 and January 1943, he gave presentations in Oakland, California, in his hometown of Waco, in Dallas, and to the first graduating class of black sailors from Great Lakes Naval Training Station. 13. He then reported to Puget Sound Navy Yard on May 15, 1943, and was advanced to cook first class on June 1 when he reported to the escort carrier Liscombe Bay. 13. He was featured on the 1943 Navy recruiting poster Above and Beyond the Call of Duty, designed by David Stone Martin. 25. Miller's recognition wasn't just posthumous, and it was a step forward for civil rights in U.S. history. The Japanese still cite the Pearl Harbor attack as occurring on December 8, 1941 in their sources because of this. It absolutely is plausible that the Japanese ambassador got instructions to declare war at X time but was told to do it on December 8 because someone in Central Command fucked up. Edit, someone below me has noted that that's not the reason they fucked things up. I was just speculating, but let it be known right here, right now, that I was wrong. Regardless, if the time frame was close enough for a mistake like that, I'm unsure how much real preparation would have been ready on the American side. Still a pretty scummy move by Japan emo. Believably in line with other actions they took during World War II. Their desperation doesn't excuse their methods, either. Delayed the attack. While by no means justifying the attack, this type of reasoning always seems to imply Japan just randomly decided to declare war on the USA, when there are three factors to consider. America's involvement/disapproval of the Manchurian invasion and Sino-Japanese technically, already in combat with Japan via Flying Tigers campaign, however small, on top of being allied with the Axis powers. America's oil blockade/European colonies in the Pacific controlling raw resources. This is where the moral high ground of World War II gets shady, before the atrocities, of course, as basically Japan wanted to take the Pacific colonies away from European/Western control, which is a result of Western imperialism. If Japan backed down from invading China to appease the West, it would be like America leaving Vietnam or Afghanistan after 2 years. Surprise, most militarized high on patriotism nations do not like leaving invasions unfinished. Both nations had been preparing for war against each other while maintaining trade agreements. There was a suggestion of a new trade agreement that would defuse the situation. Roosevelt refused to meet with the Japanese ambassador for peace talks, which may have de-escalated both the Japanese invasion of China and the Pacific theater. Combine this with the faults in our own controversial delayed response. TL, Dr. Pearl Harbor is a fucking more controversial and complicated than Japan decided surprise war against poor America. This isn't Japan wasn't at fault, but the standard of teaching Pearl Harbor from the American perspective is historically narrow. Honestly, the real question here would be, when is a Titanic-style film about 9/11 starring a firefighter Jack and a WTC employee Rose going to be made? Maybe 20 years from now? Titanic is actually a really funny movie. That woman asking for more ice in her drink as the iceberg hits kills me, so we'd have to be at a point where 9/11 jokes aren't too soon. Edit. I operate a YouTube channel on September 11th history, so I know quite a lot about that day, and I also conveniently rewatched half of Titanic the other day. I'm going to do my best to pitch what a Titanic-style move based on that day would look like. I'm not saying they should make this film, I'm just predicting what Hollywood would do, which includes stupid decisions and bad romance. 9/11, motion picture. Begins in the modern day. 9/11 conspiracy theories are actually built around Rose, who supposedly died above the impact zone in the North Tower, but upon the discovery of new footage, she is now seen escaping New York afterward. The real Rose appears at the memorial for the first time, where a group of survivors recognize her as a former employee of Cantor Fitzgerald. You did not survive if you worked for them. The survivors are shocked and ask her if she'll tell her story. Flashback to 2001, Rose is a young businesswoman rising in the NYC financial game. She goes to the new head of WTC Security John O'Neill's welcome party, where she meets Jack, a probie, still in training, firefighter who tends to only associate with the Port Authority officers and other firefighters. At the party, John O'Neill mentions to a crowd that include Jack how he fears another terrorist attack may take place on the Trade Center in the future, and that it could come from air this time. O'Neill worked as part of the FBI task force trying to nail bin Laden before this. He knew more than anyone. A big player in the financial world, Billy Zane, WTF his name is in the movie, pulls Rose aside and offers her a job if she'll sleeps with him. When she resists, Billy Zane threatens to talk to her higher-ups to fire her and ensure she never works in New York City again. Rose runs out crying and Jack follows her. She goes to the top of the North Tower to consider jumping, and he stops her, saying that she could accidentally crush someone below. Rose and Jack bond over this and begin a close friendship. Similar to the class divide of Titanic, the divide is Manhattan, Rose, and Staten Island, Jack. There's lot of Titanic irony here. Rose describes how another bombing on the Trade Center wouldn't work because of the safety changes Giuliani made and the drills they run often. Jack is even briefly introduced to Giuliani. I kind of feel like I'm rambling on, and I don't care about the first VHS tape of Titanic, so let's move on to the second one, the action. Jack and Rose have to already be close when the plane hits. I'm going to say he's in the North Tower lobby and she's in the elevator going up. Jack has come with her to help her confront Billy Zane, and he's talking with Port Authority officers as she goes up. Flight 11 impact the North Tower and sends jet fuel straight down some elevator shafts, exploding out into the main lobby. All of the glass windows shatter and people are on fire. Jack already has his gear and is helping put out burn victims and escorting people away from the windows. It isn't long after that the bodies begin hitting outside. Rose is stuck in an undamaged elevator. Jack finds John O'Neill and asks how fast the elevators travel as he attempts to figure out if Rose is already dead. Jack is able to figure out that if Rose's elevator was not taken out by jet fuel, she'll be trapped inside, and so he runs up as so many escape down. Rose is in her elevator with another man who sings Broadway tunes to keep them calm and pass time, based on a real person/story, and they have no idea there has been an attack. Jack screams for Rose as he runs past every elevator, and 17 minutes later, he finally finds her, using an axe to break the door open and get Rose and the other employee out. As Rose asks what is going, she walks to the window just in time to see United 175 fly over the Hudson and into the South Tower. Rose wants to go up and help her coworkers escape, but Jack tells her it's too dangerous and he needs to get her out of here right now. During this period, Rose and Jack help many employees escape by escorting them to the stairs, helping them move past unignited jet fuel, or breaking down office doors that were sealed shut when the weight of the buildings shifted. They all meet their most historical figures during this time, including Roselle the seeing eye dog. Jack gets Rose to the lobby and tells her to exit through the lower concourse, mall underneath, to avoid the chance of getting hit by bodies or debris outside. Rose meets Father Judge, the fire chaplain who praises a man, one of the Naudet brothers, films him. As Jack joins the other firefighters and heads back upstairs, the South Tower collapses, sending a wave of smoke and debris into the lobby that kills Father Judge. He's the Titanic band in this scene. First responders abandon the North Tower and carry off a screaming Rose as she says she has to go back and find Jack before this tower comes down too. The firefighters say their radios don't work inside the tower. Giuliani never installed new ones after the '93 bombing. A lot of the men inside can't hear the call to evacuate. Rose breaks free and goes back inside, where she meets Billy Zane, who is helping evacuate employees. He tries to convince her to come with them, but she runs up. She eventually gets to Jack, who is helping a disabled woman down the stairs, and tells everyone the tower will collapse. Jack still doesn't want to abandon the firefighters above him, but with Rose back he knows she won't leave without him. They make it down to a lower staircase when the tower collapses and are sealed in, but miraculously survive. This is true. The stairwell can be viewed at the Memorial Museum. Jack is badly wounded during the collapse as she lays over Rose's body to protect her. He says his last words to her in darkness, and when first responders later open the stairwell, Jack is dead. Rose takes the boat lifts out of New York City and never returns. She tells her story now because she is dying of cancer she got from the attacks, and she never wanted her story to be used for political purposes. There are men and women who fake being in the attacks. Why couldn't there be one who was there to do the opposite? She had to come forward and clear the air on the conspiracy surrounding her. She realized that with so many seeming to forget the attacks today, she couldn't afford to ignore them anymore. They didn't define the life she lived, but she'll never forget them, and she'll never forget Jack. That's the best I could do. Please don't steal this idea. There are way better 9/11 movie ideas than Michael Bay ripping off Titanic. Again, make a movie specifically about the boat lifts, because that would rock. We kind of already got a 9/11 movie. Remember Me. Though it wasn't 100% set in the towers, just the ending really. Titanic 1912, movie 1953, Titanic 1998. About 40 years wait. Chernobyl 1986, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2011, Die Hard 5, 2013, Chernobyl 2019. About 25 years wait. 9/11 2001, Remember Me, briefly, 2010. For a full-blown movie about it, probably about 2040 to 2070 to be honest. It isn't the same as Chernobyl or Titanic because it was seen before the world. We watched people fall from the towers, we saw the destruction and horror in one of the most well-known cities in the world. Whereas with Titanic, we didn't witness the destruction and horror. As well as the fact that it was a terrorist attack, not an accident. A movie about it would have to be careful to not incite violence or hate against those of the same race as the terrorists. The issue basically is in how much do you show. Oliver Stone's 2006 movie World Trade Center is okay, but it's still a PG-13 film about mass murder and it just feels held back. They obviously were uncomfortable with how they would portray the attacks. Literally everyone watching the movie had already seen those images 100 times before, so why subject them to it again seemed to be the feeling. In my opinion, the film should have started with the two officers in the rubble and been told through flashback. Let's solve this with math. 2018 minus 1912 is 106, making the map over 1 century after the tragedy. This would mean that a 9/11 map would get released in 2107, but there are other variables in play here. First, the numbers. About 3 times as many people died during 9/11 in the Titanic, and would multiply the length by 3, making the wait be 318 years. Also, take into account the fact that the attacks were caused on purpose, not like slamming into an iceberg. Let's assume that everyone related to the causing of 9/11 died of natural causes by about 2040. Adding an extra 40 years to our time, we get 358 years of waiting before 9/11 gets a Call of Duty map. But we've forgot one critical detail. The soulless industry that AAA game companies produce to milk as much money as possible. They will obviously want a piece of the tragedy as soon as it is relegated to a memory of the children of the people who remembered, then make it without upsetting anyone. This drags the wait time to somewhere around the 2050s at least. Enjoy the new map when you're in your 60s and 70s.